While at the beach with my kids, a message flashed: leave quietly, don't tell your children. I did, and what I found next revealed a chilling scheme as police moved in. Can you imagine waking up one day and realizing your own children, your flesh and blood, were plotting to murder you for money? Because that's exactly what happened to me, Joan Morales, at 78 years old. And what saved my life? A single, chilling text message on a perfect summer day. It was July 15th, 2023. A beautiful, almost idyllic Saturday on the beaches of Chicago. I was 78, and it had been 2 long, silent years since I lost my dear Robert, my husband of 52 years. My children, Sergio, Christina, and Raquel, had insisted we spend the day together as a family. And I have to confess, I was absolutely thrilled. Since Robert's death, our relationships had become so distant. Sergio, 55, always too busy with his business. Christina, 52, wrapped up in her world of luxury. And Raquel, the youngest at 48, barely visited. But that day, they seemed different. More attentive. More loving. We were set up under a bright blue umbrella near a beachside bar. The lake was calm, seagulls circled lazily overhead, and I watched other families enjoying their day. My children chatted excitedly about their lives, their jobs, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt truly part of something again. My heart felt warm, full of a hope I hadn't realized I'd lost. Then, my phone buzzed. It was 2:47 p.m. exactly. An unknown number. Normally, I never answer calls from numbers I don't recognize, but some primal instinct, pushed me to look at the text message that had just arrived. Leave quietly. Don't say anything to your children. A chill, completely unrelated to the lake breeze, ran down my spine. Who could send me something like that? And why, specifically, mention my children? I glanced at Sergio, Christina, and Raquel. They were still talking, laughing, as if nothing had happened. But now their laughter sounded strange to me. Almost forced. My phone vibrated again. Another message, from the same unknown number. It's urgent. Your life depends on it. I'm in the parking lot. Red car. Trust me. My heart began to pound a frantic rhythm. All my life, I've been a cautious woman. But I've also learned to trust my gut. And my gut was screaming that something was terribly, profoundly wrong. I feel a little dizzy, I lied, getting up slowly from the lounge chair. I plastered on a smile, praying it looked natural. I think it was too much sun. I'm going to take a short walk to cool off. Sergio stood up immediately, ever the responsible eldest. Do you want me to come with you, Mom? No, I replied, my voice sounding unnaturally bright. I just need to walk a bit. I'll be right back. Christina looked at me, with what seemed like genuine concern. Be careful, Mom. Don't go too far. Her words, meant to reassure, now sounded like a veiled warning. I walked towards the parking lot. Each step I tried to make casual, but my mind was racing. Who knew I was here? Who knew my children well enough to send such a specific, terrifying warning? Then I saw her. A woman, maybe 35, with brown hair pulled back in a ponytail, waiting next to a red Ford Focus. Her eyes held a raw mix of nervousness and determination that I recognized instantly. Nora, I whispered, disbelief lacing my voice. Nora Jimenez. Sergio's housekeeper. She'd worked for him for 8 years. I knew her well. A responsible, discreet woman, a single mother to an 8-year-old girl named Valerie. She'd always shown me respect, and in return, I'd always made sure Sergio treated her well, paid her a fair wage. Mrs. Morales, she said, her voice trembling. Thank you for coming. I know this must seem very strange, but I need you to listen carefully. Your life is in danger. My world just stopped. The noise of children playing, the waves, the murmur of conversations, everything faded into a distant hum as I processed her words. What are you talking about, Nora? She glanced nervously towards the beach, where my children were surely wondering why I was taking so long. We can't talk here. Get in the car, please. I have something to show you. My gut instinct, the one that had just saved me from staying put, screamed to trust her. For 8 years, Nora had been nothing but honest and loyal. If she was risking so much to warn me, It had to be serious. I got into the passenger seat, and she started the car immediately. Mrs. Morales, she began, driving towards a quieter, secluded industrial area, away from prying eyes. What I'm about to tell you will be very hard to believe, but your children are planning to hurt you. Nora's words echoed in my head like alarm bells. My children planning to hurt me, it was impossible. Unthinkable. But the sheer seriousness etched on her face forced me to listen. She stopped the car. With trembling hands, she pulled out her cell phone. Mrs. Morales, I've worked at Sergio's house since 2015. Yesterday, while cleaning his office, I found some papers that made me suspicious. But what I discovered later. Her voice broke. I took pictures as proof. She swiped the screen and showed me the first image. It was a bank document with my signature. But I didn't remember ever signing it. Do you recognize this signature, Mrs. Morales? I examined the screen closely. It was undeniably my handwriting, my characteristic signature. But something deeply disturbed me. The date was July 8, 2023. Just a week ago. Yes, it's my signature, but... I tried to remember. Wait, that was the day of the barbecue at Sergio's house. They asked me to sign several papers. Said they were routine forms for the family's health insurance. Nora nodded gravely. That's what I thought. But look at the document you actually signed. She zoomed in. My eyes widened in horror. It wasn't for health insurance. It was a bank transfer authorization for $950,000. My entire fortune. The savings of a lifetime of honest work. This can't be real, I murmured, feeling the blood run cold in my veins. There's more, Nora continued, showing me another picture. This time, it was a power of attorney document, giving Sergio absolute power over all my assets. And then, the third image left me breathless. It was a draft of a will, clearly forged, where I left my entire estate to my 3 children, eliminating any charitable donations I had planned to make to my church. But how is this possible? I stammered. I was conscious when I signed. I remember that day perfectly. Nora looked at me with a mix of compassion and urgency. Mrs. Morales, do you remember feeling strange after you ate? Dizziness, confusion, drowsiness. A shiver, deeper than before, ran down my spine. Indeed. I remembered feeling unusually tired that afternoon. I had blamed my discomfort on the heat and my age, or perhaps the special wine Sergio had insisted I try. I found this in Sergio's kitchen, she said, showing me another photo. It was a small bottle with a medical label, Brozapam, 6 milligrams. There were also traces of a colorless liquid I didn't recognize. My mind worked feverishly, connecting the dots. The insistent family lunch, my strange drowsiness, the documents I signed without reading completely because I trusted my family. They drugged me, I whispered, more to myself than to her. I think so, yes, Nora confirmed. But the worst is yet to come. She took a deep breath before continuing. Last night, while clearing the plates after dinner, I overheard a phone conversation Sergio was having. He was talking to someone about a very large debt, Mrs. Morales. He mentioned the amount of $380,000. The figure hit me like a punch. It was a fortune, one none of my children could gather with their regular incomes. Sergio had sounded desperate. He was telling the person on the phone that the old problem would be solved soon, that he had access to the necessary funds. When he mentioned your name, Mrs. Morales, Nora finished, her voice barely a whisper. I knew I had to warn you. Who do they owe so much money to? I asked, my voice barely steady. I'm not entirely sure, but I heard names that scared me. People from the south side of Chicago involved in illegal loans. Sergio repeated the name, Miguel the Blade, several times. I knew that reputation. Chicago had its dangerous areas and ruthless loan sharks were a reality I preferred to ignore. But now, that brutal reality had reached my own family. But if they already have access to my money with those forged documents, why do they need? Nora interrupted me, her expression grave. Because there's a problem, Mrs. Morales. The banks are being more cautious with large transfers from seniors. They need you to be present, conscious, and personally ratify any transactions over $100,000. Then I understood the full extent of the danger. It wasn't enough to have drugged me once to get my signature. They needed to keep me under control, manipulable, perhaps permanently unable to make independent decisions. There's something else you should know, Nora added, her voice barely audible. This morning, before they left for the beach, I heard Christina on the phone with someone. She mentioned something about a plan B in case you became a problem. Plan B? My blood ran cold. I couldn't hear everything clearly, but she mentioned words like accident, stairs at home, and quick inheritance. The true, horrifying weight of the situation hit me with full force. My own children. My own flesh and blood. They weren't just planning to rob me. They were willing to get rid of me if necessary. That's why I sent you the message, Mrs. Morales. Last night, I called the police and explained everything. They're investigating, but they need more evidence. Earlier today, they told me they would come to search your house this afternoon. The police are involved? I asked, completely stunned. Yes. Inspector Thomas Grant is in charge of the case. He was the one who suggested I warn you discreetly when you went out together today. The police are already on their way to your house to execute a search warrant. My mind tried to process all this overwhelming information. In less than an hour, I had gone from enjoying a family day at the beach to discovering that my children were planning to drug me, rob me, and possibly kill me. What do we do now, Nora? We have to go directly to the police station. Inspector Grant wants to take your statement and do a blood test, too. See if there are still traces of the drugs they gave you last week. I felt a mixture of profound gratitude and paralyzing terror. Gratitude for this brave woman who had risked everything to save me, and terror for the inconceivable betrayal of my own children. Thank you, Nora. I don't know how I can ever repay you for what you've done for me. She looked at me with fierce determination. You always treated me with respect and dignity, Mrs. Morales. I could never let them hurt you. As we headed to the police station, a terrible question hammered in my mind. How could my family reach this point of desperation? And above all, what else were they willing to do to get my money? The drive to the police department took only 15 minutes, but it felt like an eternity. Nora drove with obvious nervousness, constantly checking the rearview mirrors, while I tried to grasp the true scale of the conspiracy against me. Mrs. Morales, she said, breaking the tense silence, there are more details you need to know before you talk to Inspector Grant. What I discovered is much more complex than I initially imagined. She pulled over on a side street near the station and turned to me, her worried expression deepening. Last night, after overhearing Sergio's phone call, I decided to investigate further. I waited until everyone was asleep and searched his office thoroughly. I found a hidden folder behind some books. She took out her phone again and showed me pictures of documents that made my blood run cold. They were receipts for extravagant purchases. A brand new Mercedes-Benz for $95,000 in Sergio's name. Luxury jewelry for Christina worth $45,000. And a condo on the coast that Raquel had recently bought for $180,000. None of your children have enough income to afford this, Nora explained, her voice tight. Sergio makes about $3,500 a month at his consulting job. Christina gets around $2,800 as an administrator, and Raquel barely makes $2,200 at her part-time job. The math was crushing. Between the three of them, they didn't make more than $9,000 a month. Not nearly enough to maintain the luxuries they had clearly been enjoying. So, how did they finance all of this? That's the scariest part, Mrs. Morales. I found private loan contracts signed with illegal lenders. The terms are brutal. 15% monthly interest, personal guarantees that include physical threats, and impossible repayment deadlines. She showed me photocopies of those contracts. The creditors' names were unfamiliar, but the amounts were astronomical. Sergio owed $150,000, Christina $120,000, and Raquel $110,000. In total, $380,000 in debt to people who, according to the contract clauses, would not hesitate to use violent methods to collect their money. And this Miguel, the Blade guy, Nora continued, from what I could discreetly find out, is the leader of an organization dedicated to loan sharking in the rougher neighborhoods of Chicago. He has a criminal record for extortion, serious threats, and assault. His collection methods are known for their brutality. A deep chill ran down my spine. My children had not only fallen into the clutches of ruthless lenders, but they had chosen one of the most dangerous men in the city. When were these loans due? Nora checked her photos. The final deadline was July 20th, 2023. That's in 5 days. If they didn't pay in full, the consequences would be severe. Now, I understood the desperation that had driven their plan. They had no alternative. Either they got my money immediately, or they would face retaliation that could include physical violence, damage to their property, or worse. But there's something more disturbing I found, Nora continued in a trembling voice. A recorded conversation on Sergio's phone that he apparently forgot to delete. She played a low-quality audio, but it was clear enough to understand the dialogue. It was Sergio's voice talking to a man with a thick Chicago accent. "Miguel, I need more time. The old lady is more suspicious than we thought." "There's no more time, Sergio. You know the rules. $380,000 by Thursday. Or we start with the corrections. I have a plan. My mother has almost $1 million saved up. I just need her to be cooperative. And if she doesn't cooperate?" There was a long pause before Sergio responded with a coldness that shattered my heart. "Then we'll have to speed up her departure. A household accident. Something natural for a woman her age. The inheritance would be processed in weeks." Tears started streaming from my eyes. Hearing my own son plan my death with such icy indifference was more painful than any financial betrayal. "When did you record this?" "The night before last." Sergio was talking in the garden, thinking no one was listening, but he left his bedroom window open, and his phone was connected to an automatic recorder he uses for his work meetings. "Are the others in on the plan?" "Completely. I found WhatsApp messages between the 3 siblings coordinating the details. Christina had researched medications that could simulate a natural heart attack. Raquel had discreetly consulted with a funeral home about rapid cremation procedures. The scale of their conspiracy overwhelmed me. It wasn't an impulsive decision driven by financial desperation. It was a meticulously crafted plan where each sibling had specific responsibilities to ensure my elimination and immediate access to my inheritance. "What kind of drugs did they use on me last week?" According to what I found, a combination of bromazepam, a powerful anti-anxiety drug, mixed with a liquid derivative known as citrulline. This second substance causes temporary confusion, short-term memory loss, and an excessive sense of trust that makes victims sign documents without questioning them. Where did they get those substances? Christina works at a pharmaceutical company. She has access to controlled medications and knows their effects. Apparently, she had been preparing this mixture for weeks. The puzzle was starting to come together. It wasn't a coincidence they invited me to that family lunch, nor that they insisted so much that I try the special wine they had bought for the occasion. Everything had been calculated to temporarily incapacitate me and get my signature on documents I didn't remember reading completely. "Nora," I asked, my voice raw with emotion, "why did you decide to risk so much to help me? You could have just quit and found another job." She looked at me with a mix of determination and profound emotion. "Mrs. Morales, you were the only person who treated me with dignity when I needed it most. When Valerie was born and I became a single mother, you made sure Sergio gave me paid maternity leave. When my daughter was sick last year, you personally paid the medical bills without me asking." Her words moved me deeply, a stark contrast to the betrayal I was reeling from. "Besides," she continued, "if I allowed them to hurt a person as good as you, what kind of example would I be for my daughter? Some principles are worth more than any job." As we finally headed towards the entrance of the police station, a terrible certainty settled in my mind. The family I had loved and protected for decades was willing to murder me for money. And if I didn't act immediately, in 5 days, I could be dead. While we waited in the station's lobby for Inspector Grant to see us, my mind began a painful journey into the past. Nora's revelations had opened a deep wound, but they also forced me to re-examine the last 2 years of my life with devastating clarity. It all started on September 23, 2021. Robert, my husband of 52 years, passed away after a 6-month battle with pancreatic cancer. I vividly remember how my children behaved during those final days. Attentive, loving, seemingly devastated by the impending loss of their father. But now, with this new perspective, certain details I had interpreted as filial love took on a sinister meaning. During Robert's last weeks, Sergio had repeatedly insisted on knowing the family's financial details. He said it was important to be prepared to help me with the paperwork after the funeral. Christina was the one who asked the most about my savings and retirement plans. "Mom, we want to make sure you have everything you need," she repeated constantly. At the time, I took their insistence as genuine concern for my future well-being. Raquel, the youngest, had been more subtle. She offered to accompany me to doctor's appointments and bank meetings, always with the excuse of supporting Mom in these difficult times. I never suspected she was memorizing information about my accounts and investments. The first few months after the funeral were the darkest of my existence. The house felt empty, silent, filled with memories that choked me. Robert had been my anchor, my reason for getting up every morning. Without him, I sank into a deep depression that almost consumed me. That's when I found refuge in faith. St. Michael's Parish became my sanctuary. Father Anthony, a wise man of 65, welcomed me with understanding and patience. I started by attending Sunday Mass, then weekday services, and eventually became a daily parishioner. "Joan," Father Anthony would tell me, "the pain you feel is the other side of the love you shared with Robert. Don't run from it. Accept it as part of your eternal connection with him." His words comforted me, and gradually I found peace in prayer, in meditation, in the feeling of being part of something bigger than my own suffering. The church gave me structure when my life lacked purpose and community when loneliness threatened to destroy me. During this period of spiritual renewal, my children intensified their visits. At first, I was thrilled, thinking we had finally developed the family bonds Robert had always wanted. Sergio came on Tuesday afternoons, Christina on Thursdays, and Raquel on Saturdays. It seemed like a perfect routine of family support. But now, remembering those visits with a new perspective, I recognized disturbing patterns. They always asked about my health in a specific way. Was I taking any medication? Was I having trouble remembering things? Had I considered setting up a power of attorney for medical emergencies? The questions about money were constant, but always disguised as concern. "Mom, have you thought about consolidating your savings into a single account to simplify management? Wouldn't it be more convenient to have online access to your funds? Have you updated your will since Dad passed away?" Sergio had been particularly insistent on this last point. In January of 2022, just 4 months after the funeral, he pressured me to visit the lawyer as a precaution. At the time, I gave in because it seemed like a sensible suggestion from a responsible son. I vividly remembered that visit to the lawyer's office. Sergio accompanied me and stayed present throughout the entire consultation. The lawyer, Mr. Garcia, had prepared several documents that, according to Sergio, would modernize my will and protect my assets. I signed everything confidently, believing I was securing my children's future. But now I wondered what additional documents they might have slipped in among those papers. Had I signed powers of attorney without realizing it? Bank authorizations hidden among legitimate will clauses? Christina had adopted a different, but equally effective, strategy. She presented herself as the unofficial family administrator, offering to handle my monthly bills and paperwork. "Mom, let me help you with these boring things. You focus on recovering emotionally." Gradually, she had taken control over various aspects of my daily financial life. She paid my utility bills, handled bank correspondence, and took care of renewing insurance and subscriptions. In retrospect, this had given her complete access to information about my financial resources. Raquel had chosen the most subtle and manipulative approach. She focused on my emotional state, presenting herself as the understanding daughter who best understood my pain. "Mom, you know you can trust me with any concern. The older ones sometimes don't understand, but I'll always be here for you." Her visits included long conversations about Robert, shared memories, and plans to honor his legacy. During these intimate chats, Raquel extracted information about my charitable intentions, my desire to donate to the parish, and my plans for the future. Now I understood that each child had developed a specialty within their conspiracy. Sergio handled the legal and notary aspects. Christina controlled the day-to-day financial administration, and Raquel manipulated my emotional state to keep me vulnerable and trusting. The most significant change had occurred in the last 6 months. Their visits became more frequent, but also more tense. I noticed exchanges of glances between them, conversations that stopped abruptly when I entered the room, and a level of stress I didn't know how to interpret. In June of 2023, Sergio had suggested those regular family gatherings at his house. "Mom, now that you're doing better emotionally, we should spend more time together as a family." Dad would have wanted to see us united. Those Sunday lunches at Sergio's house became weekly events that I looked forward to with genuine joy. Finally, we seemed to have found the family harmony Robert had dreamed of. But evidently, for my children, those gatherings had a completely different purpose: to study my routines, assess my mental state, and prepare the ground for their final plan. The lunch on July 8th, when they drugged me to get my signature, had simply been the culmination of months of meticulous preparation. It wasn't an impulsive act of desperation, but the result of a carefully planned strategy to access my assets. As I sat in that waiting room, surrounded by posters about public safety and crime prevention, a bitter realization settled in my conscience. For 2 years, I had mistaken calculated manipulation for filial love. My emotional vulnerability after Robert's death had turned them into predators, not comforters. The faith that had helped me heal so much now faced its most difficult test. How could I reconcile Christian teachings about forgiveness and family love with the brutal reality that my own children were willing to murder me for money? "Joan Morales, please come in." The voice of Inspector Thomas Grant echoed in the waiting room with professional authority. He was a man of about 50, medium height, sturdy build, and a piercing gaze that inspired immediate confidence. His impeccable uniform and serious demeanor calmed me in the midst of the emotional storm I was going through. "Good morning, Inspector. This is Nora Jimenez, the one who alerted me to the situation," I said as we headed to his office. "Miss Jimenez, your call last night was very timely. We've been working intensely since then to verify the information you provided," the inspector replied, inviting us to sit in front of his desk, which was cluttered with files and documents. The office was sparse, but efficient. White walls decorated only with police certificates, a detailed map of Chicago, and official photographs of the mayor and state officials. 2 computers were running simultaneously, displaying databases I couldn't make out from my position. "Joan, before we proceed with your formal statement, we need to run some urgent medical tests. Our forensic team requires blood and hair samples to detect any possible residues of substances that may have been administered without your consent." "Is it still possible to detect anything after a week?" I asked with concern. "Depending on the substances used, yes," he explained. Bromazepam can remain detectable in blood for 3 to 7 days, and certain metabolites persist in hair for up to 3 months. If they really gave you the combination Miss Jimenez describes, we'll find evidence." A forensic technician entered carrying a professional medical case. The procedure was quick but thorough: blood draw, hair samples, and a basic physical exam to assess my overall health. During the process, the inspector continued to explain the legal steps that would follow based on the photographic evidence Miss Jimenez provided. "We obtained a court order to tap your children's communications and search their homes. The operation began 2 hours ago." "They're already at my house?" "Indeed. A specialized team is executing simultaneous searches at the residences of Sergio, Christina, and Raquel. We've also requested that the bank freeze all their accounts to prevent unauthorized transfers while the investigation is ongoing." The police efficiency pleasantly surprised me. In less than 24 hours since Nora's call, they had organized a complex operation that protected my interests and sought additional evidence against my children. "Inspector, what will happen when my children get back from the beach and discover the search?" "We've coordinated the operation to coincide with their absence. Our agents have orders to complete the search before they return. However, we need your cooperation for a crucial phase of the plan." Grant leaned forward, adopting a more confidential posture. Joan, we want to organize a controlled operation that will allow us to obtain direct confessions from your children. The documentary evidence is strong, but recorded testimonies would considerably strengthen the case. What kind of operation? The proposal terrified me. Voluntarily returning to the place where my own children had planned to drug me again, knowing they were desperate and that their debt deadlines were days away, seemed extremely dangerous. Are there no less risky alternatives? I understand your concern, but let's consider the current legal situation, the inspector explained, consulting his notes. We have documentary evidence of forgery, photographs of controlled substances, and compromising phone recordings. However, a competent lawyer could argue that you signed those documents consciously, that the medications are for legitimate medical use, and that the recorded conversations are open to multiple interpretations. Nora, who had remained silent during the conversation, intervened with determination. Mrs. Morales, I'll be there to protect you. I can make sure you don't consume anything they offer you and maintain constant communication with the police. Miss Jimenez is right, Grant confirmed. She would be our official collaborator in the operation. Additionally, we'll install external surveillance equipment and have rapid response units positioned within a 2-block radius. What happens if something goes wrong? If they realize they're being recorded, or if they decide to accelerate their plan? We've considered those risks. You would carry an emergency device that would trigger immediate intervention if you press a specific button. Also, we'll establish security codes that Ms. Jimenez can use to request help without arousing suspicion. The inspector showed me a tiny device similar to a shirt button, but equipped with a high-sensitivity microphone and GPS transmitter. The technology impressed me with its sophistication and discretion. Let's also consider the consequences of not acting decisively, Grant continued. Your children are under extreme pressure from violent lenders. If they don't get the money in the next few days, they might try something desperate and irreversible. His words forced me to confront a terrible reality. Regardless of my fears, my children had already crossed moral lines from which there was no return. If I didn't stop them now, when I had police protection and legal evidence, the next opportunities might be too late. When would this operation be? Ideally tonight. According to our investigations, your children were planning to invite you to dinner tomorrow, Sunday, to finalize certain family matters. Getting ahead of their timeline would give us a tactical advantage. How would I explain my unexpected return after leaving the beach? Miss Jimenez suggested a convincing alibi. You felt unwell during your walk. She found you disoriented near the parking lot, and she accompanied you to Sergio's house so your children could take care of you. Nora nodded, confirming the plan. I'll tell them I found you dizzy and worried about your blood pressure. They know my discretion and won't suspect I contacted the police. The forensic technician returned with preliminary results from the tests. Inspector, we confirm the presence of bromazepam in significant concentrations and have detected traces of a substance consistent with citrulline derivatives. The level suggests administration in high doses about a week ago. Perfect, Joan. This scientifically confirms that you were drugged. We have a solid basis to proceed with criminal charges. The scientific validation of Nora's suspicions filled me with a mixture of relief and horror. Relief because I finally had objective proof of the betrayal. Horror because it confirmed that my own children had been willing to chemically incapacitate me to rob me. Inspector, I said, my voice firm despite the tremor in my hands. I agree to participate in the operation. But I need one guarantee. If something goes wrong, if my life is in real danger, your agents will intervene immediately, regardless of the state of the recording. You have my personal word and my professional commitment, Joan. Your safety is our absolute priority. As we left the station to prepare the final details of the nighttime operation, a certainty crystallized in my mind. These were not the children I had raised, nor the adults I thought I had educated with ethical values. They were desperate criminals willing to do anything for money, and I would be the instrument of their own downfall. It was 6:03 p.m. when we returned to the station to finalize the details of the night operation. Inspector Grant had assembled a specialized team that included surveillance technicians, communications experts, and agents from the Rapid Intervention Unit. The professionalism of the group reassured me considerably. Joan, I'd like you to meet Sergeant Lopez, a specialist in undercover operations, and Officer Ruiz, an expert in recording devices. The inspector announced as he guided me to a meeting room equipped with detailed maps of the neighborhood where Sergio lived. Sergeant Lopez, a young man of about 35 with an athletic build and an intelligent gaze, laid out several tiny electronic devices on the table. Mrs. Morales will be using 3 redundant recording systems to ensure we capture the entire conversation with perfect clarity, he explained, delicately handling the devices. First, this directional microphone integrated into a shirt button, which records audio within a 15-foot radius. Second, a GPS transmitter hidden in your belt that allows us to monitor your exact location in real time. He showed me the third device, a small camera the size of a coin. This will be the most important element, a micro camera with a direct feed installed in your glasses. It will allow us to see exactly what you see and intervene instantly if we detect imminent danger. Officer Ruiz complimented the technical explanation. All devices are synchronized with our mobile command center, which we will park 150 yards from Sergio's house. We will have a continuous audio-visual feed and immediate response capability. How does the emergency system work? Sergeant Lopez handed me what looked like an ordinary pen. If you press this end twice in a row, it will trigger a silent alarm in our command center. We will have agents storming the house within 90 seconds. If you press it 3 times, we will consider your life to be in immediate danger, and the intervention will be even faster. Nora, who had been watching the demonstration with focused attention, raised a crucial concern. How do I communicate with you if I detect something suspicious before Mrs. Morales activates the emergency? Excellent question, Miss Jimenez. You will carry this device, Officer Ruiz replied, showing her a seemingly normal cell phone. It's programmed with speed dial numbers. If you press 1, it will signal situation under control. 2 means caution required, and 3 will trigger immediate intervention. Inspector Grant unfolded aerial photographs of the residential area where Sergio lived, pointing out strategic positions with red markers. We will have 6 agents distributed in 3 unmarked vehicles, a delivery van parked across from the park, a private car on the southeast corner, and an electric maintenance motorcycle on the back street. All access points will be monitored. What if my children suspect something unusual in my behavior? We've prepared a credible alibi to explain any nervousness, replied Sergeant Lopez, consulting his notes. If they seem puzzled by your attitude, you can attribute it to the medical scare you had at the beach. It's natural for someone your age to feel unsettled after a dizzy spell. Nora added to the strategy. I'll explain that I found you very worried about your health and that you insisted on coming back to be near your family. They know my careful personality and won't question my version. What time should we arrive at Sergio's house? The inspector checked his watch. Our surveillance agents confirmed that your children returned from the beach an hour ago. According to the microphones we installed during the morning search, they're discussing your unexpected disappearance. They seem nervous, but not suspicious. Did you manage to find any additional evidence during the search? Considerably, Grant replied. We found the hidden folder Miss Jimenez mentioned, plus 3 additional cell phones containing communications with illegal lenders. We also located a bottle of citrulline in Sergio's refrigerator labeled as medicine for mom. The revelation struck me deeply. They had been so calculating that they had even prepared fake medications specifically to drug me repeatedly. What kind of conversation do you expect me to have with them? Ideally, we want you to mention concerns about your will or your savings, explained Sergeant Lopez. If you express worries about the security of your money, they will likely try to reassure you by offering to help manage it. That will be our opportunity to record incriminating confessions. Officer Ruiz added, it would also be helpful if you mention feeling confused about documents you remember signing recently. If they're worried you're questioning the signatures from July 8th, they might reveal details about how they obtained them. Should I confront them directly with my suspicions? Absolutely not, Inspector Grant replied categorically. Any direct confrontation would put them on high alert and could provoke violent reactions. Maintain the attitude of a concerned but trusting mother. Let them be the ones to reveal compromising information. Nora intervened with a practical suggestion. Mrs. Morales could mention that she feels grateful to have such responsible children looking after her. That might make them lower their guard and talk more freely about their plans to protect her. How long should the visit last? Between 1 and 2 hours, calculated Sergeant Lopez. Enough time to get substantial recordings, but not so long as to raise suspicion about why you're staying longer than usual. The inspector handed me a sealed envelope. Joan, these are the transcripts of the phone conversations we intercepted today between your children and Miguel the Blade. The threats have intensified considerably. I read with horror excerpts of dialogues where this Miguel demanded immediate payment and described in sadistic detail the consequences of noncompliance. They weren't empty threats. They were specific promises of physical violence that included the entire family. When do you plan to intervene with this Miguel the Blade? Simultaneously with tonight's operation. While we're recording your children's confessions, another team will be arresting Miguel and his organization. We want to dismantle the entire network at once. The complexity of the operation impressed me. It wasn't just a case of family fraud. It was a comprehensive investigation against a criminal organization that had extended its tentacles to multiple victims. Are you mentally prepared for this, Joan? Officer Ruiz asked with genuine concern. Hearing your own children confess to plans to murder you will be emotionally devastating. Her question forced me to reflect on the inner strength I would need to complete this mission. For the past 2 years, my renewed faith had taught me about forgiveness and compassion, but also about justice and protecting the innocent. Officer, I replied, my voice gaining a surprising steadiness. I have lived 78 years and raised 3 children believing in values like honesty, family loyalty, and respect for life. Discovering that my own children have betrayed those principles is painful. But allowing them to continue doing so would be a betrayal of everything my husband and I tried to teach them. Nora took my hand in a supportive gesture. Mrs. Morales, remember, you are not alone in this. We are all here to protect you and ensure that justice prevails. Inspector Grant checked the watches of all the participants. It's 7:15 p.m. We'll begin deployment at 7:30. Joan and Miss Jimenez will arrive at Sergio's house at 8 p.m. exactly. By then, all our systems will be operational and ready. As they discreetly fitted me with the recording devices and checked their functionality, a mix of terror and steely determination filled my chest. In less than an hour, I would face my children, knowing it could be the last conversation we would have as a family. After tonight, they would simply be criminals who had tried to murder their own mother for money. At 8 p.m. sharp, Nora stopped her car in front of Sergio's house. My heart was pounding so hard I was afraid the recording devices would pick up its frantic rhythm. The 2-story house, with its modern light brick facade and carefully maintained garden, looked exactly the same as always. But now I perceived it as the stage for a confrontation that would define the rest of my existence. The lights in the main living room were on, casting a warm glow that in other circumstances would have been welcoming. Tonight, however, that brightness seemed sinister, like the deceptive shine of a carefully laid trap. Mrs. Morales, remember to act naturally, Nora whispered, discreetly checking her emergency phone. I'll handle everything related to food and drinks. Don't touch anything that hasn't passed through my hands first. I took a deep breath, adjusted my glasses equipped with the micro camera, and gently touched the emergency pin in my right pocket to confirm its location. The wires from the button microphone felt strange against my chest, but I hoped my shirt would hide them adequately. The door opened before we could even ring the bell. Sergio appeared with an expression that combined feigned relief and apparent concern. Mom, thank God you're okay. We were so worried when you disappeared from the beach without a word, he exclaimed, hugging me with an effusiveness that now felt completely fake, knowing his true intentions. Nora found me feeling dizzy near the parking lot, I explained, following the prepared script. I felt confused and disoriented. I think it was too much sun for someone my age. Christina appeared from the kitchen, drying her hands on a floral apron. Her smile seemed genuinely relieved, which momentarily confused me. Was it possible she still had some shred of authentic love for me, or was she simply a consummate actress? Mom, you gave us such a scare. Raquel is in the living room. She was about to call the hospitals to see if you'd been admitted, she said, coming closer to examine my face with what seemed like professional medical concern. Raquel emerged from inside the house, practically running. Her eyes showed an anxiety that could be interpreted as filial love, but which I now suspected had entirely different motivations. Mom, are you feeling better? Do you need me to take you to the doctor? Your blood pressure has been irregular lately, she asked, taking my arm with exaggerated gentleness. I'm fine, honey. I just need to rest a bit and maybe have something cool to drink, I replied, allowing them to guide me to the main living room. The inside of the house reflected the standard of living my children had been maintaining with borrowed money: Italian leather furniture, a giant screen TV, decorations that obviously cost more than any of their monthly salaries. Every object reminded me they had been living an unsustainable financial lie. Nora, please bring some mineral water from the fridge, Sergio requested with a seemingly casual tone, but I detected an underlying tension in his voice. Of course, Mr. Sergio, Nora replied, heading to the kitchen. She had been specifically instructed to control everything I was offered to drink. I sat on the main sofa, from where I could observe the expressions of my 3 children. Christina settled to my right, Raquel to my left, and Sergio remained standing in front of me, unconsciously adopting a dominant position that I found revealing. Mom, we've been discussing your financial situation, Sergio began with a seemingly concerned tone. At your age, managing so many savings and complex banking decisions must be stressful. Why do you bring that up now? I asked, feigning innocent surprise. Christina intervened with calculated gentleness. Mom, we know that Dad always took care of a lot of the paperwork. Without him, you must feel overwhelmed by so much financial responsibility. It's true that some things have gotten more complicated, I admitted, following the strategy suggested by the police. Lately, I've been feeling confused about some documents I remember signing. The 3 of them exchanged quick glances that the micro camera would have definitely captured. Sergio cleared his throat before answering. What kind of documents are you worried about, Mom? Well, I remember signing papers a week ago during our family lunch, but I can't quite remember what they were for. My memory isn't what it used to be, I said, carefully observing their reactions. Raquel leaned towards me with an understanding expression. Mom, those were just update forms for your health insurance. Nothing important, just routine paperwork that we're handling to help you out. But I have a feeling there were large numbers involved, amounts that seemed significant, I pressed on, maintaining a tone of genuine confusion. Sergio sat down in the armchair across from me, adopting a posture that was meant to be relaxed, but revealed muscular tension. Mom, maybe it's time we consider setting up a simpler system to manage your finances, something that takes the pressure off you and allows you to enjoy your retirement without administrative worries. Nora returned with a sealed bottle of mineral water, which she opened in front of me before pouring me a glass. Her movements were deliberate and careful, ensuring I could see that the liquid had not been tampered with. What kind of system are you suggesting? I asked, taking a sip of water. Christina visibly brightened. We could set up a joint account where one of us has authorization to handle your daily expenses. That would free you from having to remember bills, investments, and bank procedures. A joint account? Wouldn't I lose control over my own money? Not at all, Mom, Raquel replied with false sweetness. It would simply be an administrative tool. You would maintain absolute ownership. We would just help you with the daily management. Besides, Sergio added, leaning forward, considering your episode at the beach today, it might be wise to have contingencies in place for your own safety and peace of mind. What kind of contingencies? Well, if you had another episode of confusion, or if your health temporarily worsened, you would need someone you trust to access your resources to pay for medication, urgent medical treatments, or any emergency. Christina explained in a seemingly logical tone. The conversation was unfolding exactly as the police had anticipated. My children were presenting seemingly reasonable arguments to gain control over my assets, but now I knew their true motivations. How much money do you think would be necessary to keep in that joint account? I asked, feigning genuine consideration. Sergio exchanged another quick glance with his sisters before answering. To be completely safe, maybe most of your savings. Most of it? We're talking about the $950,000 I have saved up. The silence that followed was deafening. I had just confirmed the exact amount of my assets, information they needed to verify to finalize their plans. Mom, how do you know that specific figure? Raquel asked with a curiosity that she couldn't completely hide. I checked my bank statements last week. Was it after our family lunch, when I felt so strange and sleepy? For some reason, I had insomnia that night and decided to check my finances. The three of them became visibly nervous. If I had really checked my accounts after July 8th, I would have discovered the discrepancies caused by the documents they had made me sign under the influence of drugs. Did you find anything unusual in your accounts? Christina asked, her voice trembling slightly. Well, there were some movements I didn't remember authorizing, I replied, watching as the tension in the room palpably intensified. Sergio stood up abruptly and started walking towards the window. Mom, sometimes banks process transactions with delays. It's normal to see movements that correspond to previous authorizations. Transactions of hundreds of thousands of dollars? Silence once again filled the living room. I had just crossed a line that would force them to either reveal compromising information or admit their involvement in the financial irregularities. The atmosphere in the living room had become as thick as morning fog. My three children exchanged loaded glances that I could now interpret with terrifying clarity. Sergio stopped pacing and turned to me with an expression that tried to remain calm, but his eyes betrayed a growing desperation. Mom, I think there's a misunderstanding about those bank movements, he said, slowly returning to his seat like a predator sizing up its prey. Maybe we should clarify exactly what you saw in your statements. I saw transfers for considerable amounts that I don't remember authorizing, I repeated, maintaining the tone of vulnerable confusion that had characterized my entire performance. Amounts that could solve very serious financial problems. Christina shifted restlessly on the sofa, her fingers drumming nervously on the leather cushion. Mom, sometimes we sign bank documents without paying full attention to the details. It's normal, at our age. At your age? I mean my age. Are you implying my mind isn't working properly anymore? Raquel quickly intervened, trying to soften her sister's comment. Of course not, Mom. Christina just means that handling complex finances can be stressful for anyone. But you all seem to know more about my finances than I remember myself, I observed, allowing a note of suspicion to filter into my voice for the first time in the conversation. The silence that followed stretched for several uncomfortable seconds. I could see the three siblings communicating through glances, apparently reaching some kind of nonverbal consensus. Sergio took a deep breath and adopted a more direct posture. Mom, we need to be honest with you about our family situation. What situation? The three of us. We've had some financial problems recently, he admitted in a tense voice. Nothing serious. Just some debts that piled up faster than we anticipated. Christina nodded in support of her brother's version. Mom, we've always been responsible, but the current economic situation has been tough for everyone. Expenses went up, salaries didn't keep pace. What kind of debts? I asked, feigning genuine motherly concern. Raquel exchanged a meaningful look with Sergio before answering. Loans, for the houses, the cars, some investments that didn't turn out as we hoped. How much do you owe in total? The question landed like a bomb in the living room. The three of them visibly tensed, and for several seconds no one answered. It's a considerable amount, Sergio finally mumbled. Hundreds of thousands. Yes, Christina admitted in a barely audible voice. Almost $400,000. How do you know that exact figure? Sergio stammered, his face completely pale. Christina let out an involuntary gasp, and Raquel brought her hands to her mouth as if to take back the words she was about to say. Because that's precisely the amount that appears on transfer documents bearing my signature. A signature I don't remember consciously making, I replied with a calmness I didn't feel inside. Nora, who had remained discreetly in a corner of the living room, came over to offer me more water. Her movements were deliberately slow, giving me time to process my children's reaction to my revelation. Mom, Raquel said with a broken voice. If you saw those documents, then you know we're in a desperate situation. Desperate to what extent? Sergio stood up again and began to pace in circles, running his hands through his hair. Mom, the people we owe money to are not They're not exactly traditional banks. What does that mean? It means that if we don't pay soon, the consequences go beyond credit problems, Christina explained, tears starting to form in her eyes. What kind of consequences? Raquel sobbed before answering. Mom, they threatened us. They said if we don't pay by Thursday, they would start with more persuasive methods. Who threatened you? Sergio stopped in front of the window, his back to me. A man named Miguel. Miguel Fernandez. But everyone knows him by another name. What other name? Miguel, the Blade, Christina whispered. The name confirmed everything the police had revealed to me. My children had not only fallen into the web of illegal lenders, but they had specifically chosen the most violent and dangerous one in the region. And what did this Miguel ask for? The full $380,000 plus accumulated interest, Sergio answered, turning to me, desperation evident on his face. In total, almost $420,000. When? The day after tomorrow. July 20th. And what happens if you can't pay? Silence once again took over the room. But this time it was different. It was the silence of people who had contemplated terrible possibilities and made irreversible decisions. Mom, Raquel finally said in a barely audible voice. Miguel explained to us that he has methods, too, to ensure payment one way or another. What methods? Sergio returned to the sofa and sat across from me, leaning forward with an intense expression. Mom, if something happened to you, if you had some accident or a serious health problem, we would inherit immediately. The process would be quick, especially if there's a clear will and powers of attorney already established. The words I had just heard chilled me to the bone. My own son had just admitted they had considered my death as a solution to their financial problems. Are you suggesting that my death would be convenient for you? Christina covered her face with her hands. Mom, we didn't want to think about that, but Miguel pressured us to consider all available options. All options. Raquel sobbed harder before confessing. Mom, Miguel told us that if we couldn't get the money from you voluntarily, we would have to secure the payment another way. What other way specifically? Sergio looked me directly in the eyes with a mixture of shame and desperate determination. Mom, at your age, a domestic accident wouldn't be suspicious. A fall down the stairs, a heart problem during the night, something that would seem natural. And you've already planned this accident? The silence confirmed my question more than any words could have. Christina researched medications that could simulate heart problems, Raquel admitted between sobs. Raquel consulted on rapid cremation procedures to avoid lengthy autopsies. And you, Sergio, what was your part of the plan? My eldest son looked at me with a mixture of pain and resolve that broke my heart. I would be in charge of being with you when it happened. To make sure you didn't suffer and that everything looked natural. When was this accident supposed to happen? This week, Christina whispered. Miguel gave us until Thursday, so we would have to act before then. Tomorrow. Sergio nodded slowly. We had planned to invite you over tomorrow. It was going to be the last time. The confessions I had just heard confirmed everything the police had suspected, and more. My own children had not only planned to drug me and steal my money, but they had worked out a detailed plan to murder me and make it look like a natural accident. And after my death, we would inherit immediately. Pay Miguel and no one would suspect a thing, Raquel explained in a broken voice. You would be remembered as a beloved mother who died peacefully at her son's house. Have you considered that you are describing the premeditated murder of your own mother? All three began to cry simultaneously, but their tears no longer moved me. They were tears of self-pity, not genuine remorse. Mom, we had no choice, Sergio moaned. Miguel doesn't take excuses. If we don't pay, he'll kill us, and then he'd come for you anyway. At that moment, with the full confessions recorded on the police devices, I knew my family had crossed a line from which there was no return. They were no longer my children. They were desperate criminals who had chosen murder as the solution to their self-inflicted problems. The wall clock read 9:15 p.m. when I decided I had heard enough. My children's confessions had exceeded the police's most pessimistic expectations. Not only had they admitted to the plan to drug me and steal my money, but they had specifically detailed their intention to murder me to speed up their inheritance. My children, I said with a calmness that surprised even myself. What you have just confessed to me is one of the most serious crimes under the law. Sergio straightened up abruptly, as if my words had triggered an alarm in his brain. Mom, why are you using that word, confessed? You sound like a judge or a police officer. His observation made me aware that my vocabulary had subtly changed during the conversation. After spending the entire afternoon with investigators and lawyers, I had unconsciously adopted their legal terminology. Sergio, I am your mother, and you just explained to me that you were planning to kill me tomorrow night, I replied, maintaining a serene tone. How do you expect me to react to such a revelation? Christina got up from the sofa with nervous movements. Mom, you're talking strangely. You're usually more emotional when we discuss serious family problems. Raquel also stood up, studying my face with growing attention. Mom, are you okay? There's something different about your behavior since you arrived. The tension in the room began to transform. My children were shifting from confessional guilt to defensive suspicion. Their survival instincts were kicking in as they detected inconsistencies in my act. Different in what way? I asked, trying to maintain the character of a confused old woman. Normally, after hearing something so disturbing, you'd be screaming, crying, or at least trembling, Sergio observed, approaching me with cautious steps. But you're too calm, too controlled. Nora intervened from her position by the kitchen. Mrs. Morales has been very upset since the episode at the beach. Maybe the shock made her react differently. Shock, Christina repeated, looking at Nora with growing suspicion. Nora, you found my mother at the beach, right? Exactly where and how? I found her near the parking lot. She seemed disoriented and worried about her blood pressure. Nora replied with her rehearsed version. But why were you at the beach? Raquel pressed. It was supposed to be your day off, and you usually spend it with Valerie at home. The question revealed a detailed knowledge of Nora's personal routine that unsettled me. My children had been monitoring their housekeeper's movements with an attention that suggested paranoia or preparation for something specific. Valerie wanted to go to the beach, so we decided to spend the day there, Nora explained, but her voice betrayed growing nervousness. Sergio stopped directly in front of me, leaning in to examine my face. Mom, something doesn't add up in this whole situation. What doesn't add up? First, you mysteriously disappear from the beach without explanation. Then, you return hours later with Nora, who coincidentally found you. Now, you're interrogating us about our financial problems using legal terminology. And you react with unnatural calmness to confessions that should devastate you emotionally. His analysis was too precise. My performance had been convincing during the first part of the conversation, but maintaining the character through such extreme revelations required theatrical skills I didn't possess. I just found out my own children are planning to murder me, I said, partially abandoning the pretense. Did you expect me to react with hysterics? I expected you to react like our mother, not like a professional investigator, he replied, his voice growing increasingly tense. Christina went to the window and pulled the curtain aside slightly. Mom, there are several vehicles parked in unusual places on our street. A van I've never seen before. A car that's been there for too long. My heart raced. The police operation was being detected by my children, whose paranoia had heightened their powers of observation. What are you implying, Christina? I'm implying that maybe your disappearance from the beach wasn't as accidental as you made us believe, she replied, turning to me with an increasingly hostile expression. Raquel joined her sister by the window. Christina's right. There's too much suspicious vehicle activity to be a coincidence. Sergio went to a drawer in the living room cabinet and pulled out a small pair of binoculars. As he watched the street through them, his expression progressively hardened. Mom, the man in the blue car is wearing an earpiece and has visible communication equipment on the passenger seat, he announced in a cold voice. The delivery van has no real company logos, and there's someone watching from inside. The situation was deteriorating rapidly. My children had identified the police surveillance and now considered me responsible for attracting that attention. What are you suggesting? I asked, though I already knew the answer. I'm suggesting you betrayed us, Sergio replied with a harshness I had never heard in his voice before. Somehow, you alerted the authorities about our conversations. Nora tried to intervene. Mr. Sergio, Mrs. Morales has been with me all afternoon. She hasn't had a chance to contact anyone. All afternoon with you? Christina repeated with venomous sarcasm. A housekeeper who coincidentally becomes our mother's constant companion on the same day police surveillance appears on our street. Nora just helped me when I felt sick. I protested weakly. Raquel returned from the window with a look of growing fury. Mom, you know what I think really happened? I think Nora found out something about our plans, warned you, and together you contacted the police. That's ridiculous. Is it ridiculous? Sergio interrupted, approaching me menacingly. Then explain why you're wearing a different shirt than the one you had on at the beach this morning. His observation hit me like a lightning bolt. Indeed, during the preparation for the operation at the station, I had changed my shirt to accommodate the recording devices. A seemingly insignificant detail that now compromised the entire operation. I changed because the other one was sweaty after the episode at the beach. I lied desperately. And, where did you get this new shirt? I don't recognize it from your wardrobe, Christina pressed with the insight of someone who had been studying my habits for months. Before I could answer, Sergio lunged at me and began to pat down my shirt with expert hands. Mom, there's something hard here, like a strange button. His fingers found the recording device. At that moment, the charade was definitively over. It's a microphone, he shouted, violently ripping the device from my shirt. She's recording us. Christina ran over and began to examine my glasses. And this looks like a tiny camera. Raquel ran towards Nora with a murderous expression. You contacted them. You set all this up. Mrs. Raquel, please. Nora cried, backing away towards the wall. Sergio crushed the microphone under his foot with uncontrolled fury. Mom, you just destroyed your own family. You just condemned us all. At that exact moment, as if waiting for that specific signal, the front and back doors of the house burst open simultaneously with a deafening crash. Police, get on the ground now. Armed officers stormed in from multiple directions, filling the living room with shouts of authoritative commands and the metallic sound of handcuffs being prepared. Inspector Grant appeared among the first agents, heading directly towards me. Joan, are you hurt? I'm fine, Inspector, I replied, watching as my 3 children were forced to the ground with their hands behind their backs. Mom, Sergio screamed as they put the cuffs on him. You betrayed us. We are your family. Mrs. Morales, Officer Ruiz called from the entrance. We have simultaneously arrested Miguel, the Blade, Fernandez, and 2 associates. We found documentation confirming the threats against your family. Christina sobbed hysterically as she was lifted from the floor. Mom, we were your children. How could you do this? You were my children until you decided to murder me for money, I answered with a firmness that surprised me. Raquel looked at me with pure hatred as she was escorted towards the door. You'll regret this. Family protects each other. They don't betray each other, I countered, my voice cracking but resolute. Miss Jimenez, Sergeant Lopez said, approaching Nora. Your bravery has saved a life and dismantled a criminal organization. You will have police protection until the legal process is over. As I watched my 3 children being put into separate police vehicles, a mixture of overwhelming relief and profound emotional devastation washed over me completely. I had saved my life, but I had lost my family forever. The months following that night of July 16th were a whirlwind of legal proceedings, court testimonies, and revelations that continued to shake the foundations of what I once considered my family reality. The legal process formally began on August 15, 2023, when the district attorney's office filed formal charges against Sergio, Christina, and Raquel for attempted first-degree murder, conspiracy, and fraudulent administration of a nation. The trial was held at the county courthouse, an imposing room with high ceilings and dark wood-paneled walls that reflected the solemnity of the judicial system. During the first sessions, I had to face the surreal experience of testifying against my own children, who sat at the defendant's table in prison uniforms, their expressions alternating between shame and resentment. The prosecutor, Linda Carmen, a 45-year-old woman with a reputation for unwavering toughness in cases of domestic violence, presented a devastatingly solid case. The recordings obtained during the police operation were played in their entirety before the court, causing visible shivers among the jury members as they heard my children plan my murder with calculated coldness. Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the prosecutor declared during her opening statement. We are faced with one of the most execrable cases of family betrayal to ever come before this court. 3 adult individuals, beneficiaries for decades of their mother's love and generosity, meticulously conspired to drug her, steal her entire fortune, and finally, physically eliminate her to accelerate their inheritance. The defense attorneys tried multiple strategies to minimize the severity of the charges. Sergio's lawyer argued that the debts to violent lenders had placed his client under external duress that limited their capacity for rational decision-making. Christina's defender alleged that her client had acted under the dominant psychological influence of her older siblings. Raquel's lawyer maintained that she was simply a collateral victim of her siblings' decisions. However, the evidence presented by the prosecution was overwhelming. In addition to the audio and video recordings from the police operation, investigators had recovered extensive records of phone communications, WhatsApp messages detailing every phase of the plan, and forensic evidence confirming the administration of controlled substances without my consent. The most impactful testimony came from Nora Jimenez. For 2 full days, she detailed before the court how she had gradually uncovered the conspiracy, describing with precision the conversations she had overheard, the documents she had photographed, and the moral decision that led her to risk her personal safety to protect me. Your Honor, Nora declared with a firm but emotional voice. Mrs. Morales was the only person who treated me with dignity when I needed it most. When I became a single mother, she made sure I kept my job with fair conditions. When my daughter was sick, she personally paid the medical bills without me asking. I could not allow such a kind person to be murdered by her own family. Her words resonated deeply in the courtroom, and several jury members were visibly moved as she described the details of my rescue. The most devastating moment of the trial came when the court played the full recording of my children's confessions. Hearing their voices again, coldly admitting they had planned to speed up her departure and that a domestic accident wouldn't be suspicious, shattered me emotionally. But it also strengthened my resolve that justice should run its course. Sergio tried to address me directly during his testimony. Mom, I want you to know that we never would have actually gone through with that plan. It was just desperation, just words spoken under extreme pressure. I looked him directly in the eyes and replied with a calmness that surprised me. Sergio, the recordings prove you had set specific dates, detailed methods, and contingencies to eliminate evidence. Those aren't just words. That is criminal premeditation. Christina also tried to appeal to my maternal feelings. Mom, we are your family. We've made terrible mistakes, but we are still your children. Doesn't that mean anything to you? It meant everything to me for 78 years, I replied in a broken voice. But you chose to destroy that relationship when you decided my money was worth more than my life. Raquel was the last to testify, and her strategy was the most manipulative. Mom, Dad would be devastated if he could see how you've destroyed our family. He always taught us that family forgives each other. Her words hurt me deeply. But I found strength in Robert's memory to respond. Your father taught me about unconditional love, but also about justice and protecting the innocent. He would have never tolerated you trying to murder your own mother. The most revealing phase of the trial was when the prosecutor presented additional evidence discovered during the expanded investigation. Detectives had traced my children's financial activities for the previous 2 years, revealing a pattern of extravagant spending funded entirely by usurious loans. Your Honor, the prosecutor explained, showing bank documents. The defendants did not fall into debt due to unforeseen circumstances or economic crisis. They deliberately adopted unsustainable lifestyles, financing luxuries with money borrowed at criminal interest rates, knowing from the beginning that they could not repay those amounts with their legitimate incomes. The receipts presented as evidence painted a picture of systematic financial irresponsibility. Dinners at luxury restaurants costing more than the weekly salary of average workers, purchases of clothes and jewelry for thousands of dollars, international vacations funded entirely with usurious credits. From the moment they took on these debts, the prosecutor continued, the defendants knew their only hope of solvency was to access their mother's assets. The death of their father in 2021 simply accelerated their criminal timeline. The financial investigator's testimony was particularly damaging to the defense. According to our calculations, the defendants would have needed to work for 47 years without any personal expenses to pay off their debts with legitimate income. The elimination of their mother was not a desperate, last-minute option. It was their financial plan from the beginning. Miguel "the Blade" Fernandez also testified from prison, providing additional details about the conversations he had with my children. His testimony, although clearly motivated by the desire to reduce his own sentence, confirmed that Sergio had specifically proposed the permanent solution to the problem when the initial attempts to get my money voluntarily had failed. The Morales family were not innocent victims of circumstance, Miguel declared with a cynical smile. They came to me with a complete plan. They knew exactly how much money the old lady had. They knew how to access it. And when they proposed the faster alternative, they already had all the details worked out. During the closing arguments, the defense made one last desperate attempt to generate judicial compassion. The three lawyers emphasized the family tragedy of the case, arguing that imprisoning my children would leave me completely alone in my final years. However, Prosecutor Carmen effectively dismantled those arguments. Your Honor, the defendants do not deserve compassion for having destroyed the family bonds they voluntarily chose to break. Joan Morales will not be alone. She will be safe, protected from those who proved they were willing to murder her for financial gain. On December 18, 2023, after 3 days of deliberation, the jury returned unanimous verdicts of guilty on all charges against the three defendants. The presiding judge pronounced the sentences with appropriate solemnity. Sergio Morales, Cristina Morales, and Raquel Morales are found guilty of attempted first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit a crime, fraudulent administration of another's assets, and administration of controlled substances without consent. Each is sentenced to 15 years in prison without the possibility of parole before serving 10 years of the sentence. When I heard those words, I experienced a complex mixture of relief, sadness, and final justice. My children had received the appropriate consequences for their actions. But that didn't alleviate the pain of having forever lost the people who were once the most important thing in my life. Miguel "the Blade" and his associates received even harsher sentences, 18 years for Miguel for leading the criminal organization, and 12 years each for his accomplices for aggravated extortion and serious threats. As I was leaving the courtroom for the last time, Sergio shouted at me from the defendant's box, "Mom, one day you'll regret this. We're your only family." I turned to him one last time and replied, "Sergio, my family died the night you decided to kill me. The criminals going to prison today just happened to have my children's names." The months following the trial marked the beginning of the most transformative stage of my existence. January 2024 arrived with a sense of liberation I hadn't experienced since Robert's death. For the first time in years, I could sleep peacefully, knowing that no one was planning to harm me, that my financial decisions were genuinely my own, and that the people close to me valued me for who I was, not for what I possessed. The first important decision I made was to legally formalize my relationship with Nora and Valerie. On February 15, 2024, accompanied by my lawyer and, before Mr. Garcia, the same lawyer who had been manipulated years ago by Sergio, I completed the paperwork to establish a family trust that would guarantee their financial future. Joan, the lawyer said, as we reviewed the documents, "It's admirable how you've transformed such a traumatic experience into an opportunity to build genuine family bonds." "Mr. Garcia," I replied, signing the papers with a steady hand. "I've learned that true family is not defined by blood, but by loyalty, selfless affection, and the willingness to protect one another." Nora cried when I explained the details of the trust. I had established a full educational fund for Valerie that would cover everything from her primary education to university studies, including postgraduate specialization if she so desired. I had also created a security fund that would guarantee Nora's economic stability for her entire life. "Mrs. Morales, this is too generous," she protested, her voice choked with emotion. "We didn't expect anything in return for doing the right thing." "That's precisely why you deserve it," I replied, hugging her like the daughter I never thought I'd have again. "You saved my life without expecting any benefit. Now I want to make sure you have all the opportunities that my biological children squandered." Valerie's integration into my life was surprisingly natural. This intelligent 9-year-old girl possessed an insatiable curiosity and an innate kindness that constantly reminded me why it's worth building a better future. In March 2024, I enrolled her in a prestigious bilingual school that offered advanced academic programs. "Grandma Joan," she said, using the title she had spontaneously adopted. "Why do my classmates say it's strange that my grandma isn't really my grandma?" Her words moved me deeply. "Valerie," I explained, "some grandparents are lucky enough to choose their grandchildren, and some grandchildren are lucky enough to choose their grandparents. We chose each other." In the afternoons, after Valerie finished her homework, we established routines that filled my life with renewed purpose. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, I took her to piano lessons at the Municipal Conservatory. On Saturday mornings, we attended swimming lessons together at the yacht club. On Sundays, after church, we visited museums, parks, or simply walked through the historic downtown while she told me about her dreams and aspirations. "I want to be a doctor like the one who took care of Mom when I was sick," she confided during one of those Sunday walks. "But I also really like music. Can I be a doctor and a pianist at the same time?" "Valerie, you can be anything your heart and your hard work allow you to achieve," I replied, buying ice cream at a shop near the cathedral. "Your new financial situation will give you opportunities that many children don't have, but it will be your decisions and your dedication that determine what you do with those opportunities." My spiritual life also underwent a significant deepening during this period. Father Anthony had been my guide during the darkest moments after Robert's death, and now he became my partner in building something positive and lasting. "Joan," he proposed during one of our post-Mass conversations in April 2024. "I've been thinking about your situation. You have received a second chance at life, literally. Have you considered how you could use this experience to help others facing similar situations?" His suggestion resonated immediately with my conscience. "Father Anthony, I've thought a lot about that. There must be other elderly people facing family manipulation, isolation, or financial abuse without the resources or support that I had." "Exactly. And you have both the personal experience and the financial means to make a real difference." Over the following weeks, we developed the concept of what would become the Rose Center for Senior Support. The center would be named after my late husband, honoring his memory while serving the community in a way he would have fully approved of. In May 2024, I acquired a 3-story building in a central neighborhood near the parish that had previously served as a community center. The renovation took 4 months, during which I worked closely with architects, social workers, and gerontology experts to create a space that was both functional and welcoming. The center included offices for free legal advice, spaces for psychological therapy, classrooms for educational workshops on financial protection, and a specialized library with resources for seniors. We also established a 24-hour emergency hotline for elderly people facing situations of abuse or family manipulation. Nora accepted my offer to become the center's administrative director. Her personal experience with detecting abuse, combined with her intuitive understanding of dysfunctional family dynamics, made her the perfect person to lead the daily operations. "Mrs. Morales," she told me during the first week of operation in September 2024. "We've received 17 calls from people who suspect they are being manipulated by family members. 3 cases seem as serious as yours was." "What kind of manipulation are they experiencing?" 2 cases involve adult children pressuring their parents to transfer properties, and one seems to be a situation where grandchildren are systematically drugging their grandfather to access his monthly pension. The realization that my experience was not unique, but part of a broader social problem, motivated me to intensify our efforts. I hired 2 additional social workers, established partnerships with law firms specializing in family law, and developed community education programs on the warning signs of financial elder abuse. During this period of active rebuilding, I received exactly 47 letters from my children from prison. They all followed the same pattern: pleas for forgiveness, promises of change, appeals to family unity, and occasional veiled threats about my future loneliness without them. The first letter arrived in February 2024. Sergio wrote, "Dear Mom, every day in prison, I reflect on our mistakes. We were desperate, confused, influenced by evil people, but you are still our mother, and we are still your children. Please consider visiting us so we can better explain what really happened." I read each letter meticulously, but never answered any of them. Not out of cruelty, but because I had developed a clear understanding of the difference between genuine repentance and continued manipulation. Their letters never included a full acknowledgement of the gravity of their actions, never took full responsibility for their decisions, and always included justifications that minimized their guilt. In October 2024, Christina tried a different approach, sending a letter that said, "Mom, Dad would be devastated if he knew you have completely rejected your children. He always believed in Christian forgiveness. Don't you think we've paid enough for our mistakes?" That letter bothered me more than the others because it used Robert's memory to emotionally manipulate me. I decided to respond, but not directly to her. Instead, I wrote a letter to the prison chaplain, explaining my position and asking him to share it with my children if he deemed it appropriate. "Dear Father Gonzalez," I wrote, "my late husband Robert did indeed believe in Christian forgiveness, but he also believed in justice, the protection of the innocent, and appropriate consequences for serious actions. Forgiving does not mean eliminating the legal consequences of a crime. Nor does it require restoring relationships with people who proved they were willing to commit murder for financial gain. I have forgiven my children in my heart to free my soul from resentment. But that does not mean I should expose myself again to their toxic influence or pretend that our family relationship can be restored." At the end of 2024, while writing in my personal journal, a habit I had developed as part of my emotional healing process, I reflected on the extraordinary transformation my life had undergone. A year and a half ago, I was a lonely and vulnerable widow, manipulated by my own children, living in constant, unknown danger. Today, I am the grandmother of a wonderful girl who fills my days with joy, the adoptive mother of an exceptional woman who risked everything to save me, and the founder of an organization that is helping dozens of people in situations similar to mine. On December 23, 2024, exactly 3 years after Robert's death, we organized a special celebration at the Rose Center. We had helped 112 seniors during our first 4 months of operation, preventing at least 6 serious cases of family financial abuse and providing legal and emotional support to dozens of vulnerable people. Valerie, now 10 and thriving academically in her new educational environment, played the piano during the ceremony. She performed Schubert's Ave Maria, Robert's favorite piece, with a technique and emotion that would have made my late husband cry with pride. Father Anthony offered a special blessing. "Lord, bless this family that was formed not by biological accident, but by conscious choice, based on genuine love, mutual loyalty, and a commitment to justice. May their example inspire others to recognize that true family is built on shared values, not blood ties." As I watched Nora and Valerie, illuminated by the center's Christmas lights, surrounded by elderly people who had found support and protection thanks to our work, I experienced a deep peace I hadn't felt in years. My financial fortune, which my biological children had coveted so much they planned my murder for it, now served a purpose that Robert would have fully applauded: protecting the vulnerable, building opportunities for the deserving, and creating a legacy based on active compassion instead of passive accumulation. That night, before sleeping in my renewed home, now filled with childish laughter, meaningful conversations, and the security of authentic family bonds, I wrote the final entry in my journal for the year. At 78 years old, I have learned that the deepest betrayals can open paths to the most unexpected blessings. I lost 3 children who turned out to be greedy strangers. But I gained a loyal daughter and a precious granddaughter who filled my life with renewed purpose. My money, which once represented a mortal danger, is now a tool of protection and opportunity for others. Robert would be proud of the family we have built and the good we are doing in his memory. It took me 78 years to learn that family isn't always defined by blood, but by who shows up when your world is crumbling. What about you? Have you ever faced a betrayal that reshaped your understanding of loyalty? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below.